Gordo, thank you so much for doing this. Maybe you want to get into the conversation. We're just talking about Max Pacioretty. Would you bring him back?
Yeah, would bring him back. Absolutely. It was funny the start of the playoffs and people were saying, what's he going to do? And I liked having all these different spices, and he's gone deep in the playoffs before. And it got me in preseason that the physicality of him, that he understood he's not the 6-time 30-goal scorer with the Montreal Canadiens or the role he had with Vegas. Like, he played a more physical style of game. We see Corey Perry doing that and others that have done it. So, I'm very bullish on Max Pacioretty.
Mm-hmm. Gord, at the end of the season, we had the press conference, and Tree Living, brought up we need to change our DNA. To you, what did that mean?
Well, I think Maple Leaf fans were glad to hear we're not going to go stick with the process. The frickin' process, the process. Then they just got tired of it whatever it may be, So it was a pretty strong statement. And the year before was the first time when Sheldon Keefe took accountability that, we're great in the regular season, but we have not done it in the playoffs. So I'm paying the price, and fired his Leaf coach. And as we know, caught on with another NHL team. So I heard, like you and Nick talking about it, that's the question mark about what does he mean exactly? Like, Mitch Marner, is a hell of a hockey player. He controls if he's going to go somewhere else, and does that mean it? He certainly didn't come out boldly say we're going to do anything but to keep Mitch Marner here. So, that seems like a big piece to change going somewhere else. But what is it that in the playoffs, year after year after year, I look back at it, two guys that would have fit the bill, Nazem Kadri and Zach Hyman. Now, you can't cry over spilt milk. There are reasons they left, although Hyman's contract one, I still can't believe. But anyway, so it's not, getting rid of you're going to miss Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner helped you get to the playoffs every year. What's he done in the playoffs? Well, basically like everyone else has done, not enough to get you to whatever the promised land is. So I'm interested in Brad Treliving. That was a pretty bold, blunt remark.
It was. And Gord, I was going to ask you, because you obviously have the unique aspect. You've been an executive with the Maple Leafs. You've also been in media for a long, long time. What have you thought of sort of the PR of this whole thing, the campaign, if you want to call it that? Because I'm with you. Like, there's been strong wording, I think, for the first time in a while when it comes to the Maple Leafs and the message they're trying to portray, at least in the media here.
So, Nick, I go back to the Columbus series when they lost. One of the series they should have won. And Kyle Dubas's focus was, I'm pissed off at the criticism Mitch Marner's getting. And I kept thinking, what are you talking about? You're talking social media? You're talking the lowest of lows? Like, really? They should be pissed off at themselves, right? And then the next year, Montreal, oh golly gee. Like, there never seemed to be any reaction. I use the analogy. It's like people that entitled, spoiled kids that keep denting their parents' car. And the parent goes, oh, don't worry, you can use dad's car. We'll take care of it. Oh, I dented dad's car. Well, you can use Uncle Louie's car. Don't just leave it. We'll take it in. And every year, same kind of thing, just never any kind of like, man, I'm pissed off. Like, we really let an opportunity. When we saw Connor McDavid behind the scenes last year. So I'm not saying the players are all like that at all, but there certainly is a very chill, personable, very comfortable being in Toronto, which is great group that lacks whatever that element, that accountability, whatever it may be. And I think it came from within the organization as well. Just relax, stop criticizing them. We're on the right track. We believe in it.
And you mentioned Mitch Marner. I think the writing's on the wall that he's probably going to walk away this year, barring some spectacular turnaround. If that does in fact happen, how do you think he will be remembered? Massive point guy, very talented player, homegrown guy, was here for a long time, but it seems like he's kind of lighting a match as he's leaving. What do you think the perception of Mitch Marner will be if he in fact leaves?
Well, it's funny. I'm trying to remember others, like, when Doug Gilmour went to New Jersey kind of with a whimper, not a bang, and Darryl Sittler certainly when he exited. But then, of course, you get embraced. The Maple Leaf fans appreciate what they bring to the table. Mitch, that's why this criticism of Mitch Marner, I kept saying, like, unless you're looking for it, I don't get it. I love Mitch Marner. Who wouldn't? What a phenomenal, entertaining player. What a great player to watch. 2-time first All-Star. So I would think at the end of it all, when, again, that's a long way down the road, that he'll be remembered and embraced for whatever number of years it's been. What is it, 9 or whatever it is, that wow. But again, like Kevin Garnett with the Minnesota Timberwolves, he didn't get to the promised land until he went to the Boston Celtics, right? He was the best kind of player they had. And, maybe that's kind of a similar thing right now, because it just, it's, hey, 9 years, that's the longest streak of any NHL team, 9 consecutive years making the playoffs. I mean, that's a real great accomplishment. But it's the next part about being one of only 3 teams have not gone to the Final Four in the last 23 years. And Seattle Kraken are one of them, Columbus Blue Jackets, and Toronto Maple Leafs, and so that's the stat you look back. You don't look at 1967, but you look back at post-Pat Quinn, post-Pat Burns. That team went to the Final Four 4 times in 10 years.
I love you stretching your range to the NBA too, Gord. That's some good stuff right there, buddy. But you're so right. Like the post-mortem, I've almost become numb every season, and you and I work together, and I think we did that Columbus series and the Montreal series, and we were just floored. Like, this can't happen again, and it happens again, and it happens again. I'm happy that finally there's going to be some resolution where we think this roster is going to look completely different. And I just like the fact that Tree Living came out and said such. Like, it was a definition of insanity. People in this podcast hate when I say that, but we were talking about, changing out the core 4 or mixing it up like 5 years ago. And the fact that we're still here having this conversation is insane to me.
Yeah. It seemed, well, again, they stuck with the process, and it seemed like, and you could argue, should Nylander have been the chip they traded? You could argue that, but it just happens to be he's got the big contract, and Marner's deal is up now. And so, it's funny because, again, talking about other sports, we're talking to a fan base that has seen the Jays get eliminated. Like, was it against Seattle? They had like a 10-run lead and they blew it. Then they yanked Barrios after he had 21 pitches. Then Guerrero got picked off second base, and no big deal, all part of the process. You think about what Masai did in 2018 when they got swept in 4, and he fired Dwayne Casey, and he made the Kawhi Leonard trade. Like, that would not have happened had they not exited that way. Now, there really isn't a Kawhi Leonard comparable. I don't know, although you look at Florida with Seth Jones and whatever, and but just different ways to go looking at things. And certainly Brad Treliving, to his credit, was dealt a tough card in Calgary when Johnny Gaudreau at the 11th hour changed his mind, and he had to, it hurt them in the short term, but he had to make some kind of bold moves to address the Matthew Tkachuk situation a year earlier. So yeah, it seems like where before they weren't open, they kept doubling down, that your core 4 forwards would be paid a disproportionate amount of the cap money. And it worked, and then it didn't work when it really mattered.
Mm-hmm. As we look forward, we were talking before you got on, like some of these veterans, Corey Perry and Brad Marchand and Bennett to a degree as well. Do people have to start looking at these veteran guys as maybe not so much of like damaged goods, as they come from an era that just has that playoff style of mentality, whether it's their generation or what you want to call it? But you're seeing these guys produce at an age where you're used to seeing guys tail off. Do you think their value is going to continue to hold into this free agency?
So it's interesting, and you mentioned those particular instances. The concept I totally agree with, particularly, like, don't worry about the regular season. Talk about what they can do in the playoffs, what they bring when it really matters. And and there's a fine line, as you know, between a veteran and being old. So a good veteran player versus, and it's different for everybody. Like, in the case of, Patrick Marleau he didn't have that kind of personality that, say, Corey Perry or Brad Marchand have, but he was a solid, I think he was 38 at the time, whatever he was, pickup for them. Joe Thornton wasn't, his best days were behind him and that. I think there's a lot of value about and those players want to play. First of all, 2-part. They want to play in a good situation. And in a lot of ways, they can only succeed in a good situation. They're not looking to start and grow with the Chicago Blackhawks or the San Jose Sharks. So, I just think, those and Max Pacioretty is one of those. Like Max Pacioretty, who, wasn't brought in as a trade deadline acquisition, but showed more his worth in the playoffs than any other time of the season. That you've got to be open and aware and cognizant of that.
July 1's approaching, Gordon. We're watching the Stanley Cup final, 40-year-old Corey Perry. It's hard to think a couple years ago, I think they had to pick between Perry and Wayne Simmons, and they picked Simmons, and Perry wanted to be a Leaf by all accounts. It didn't happen. But then you look conversely at the Florida Panthers, guys like Bennett, Marchand, Ekblad. If you're the Maple Leafs, who would you be interested in right now?
So it's funny, Marchand's pretty well guaranteed he's going to get term, right? That's what you would have been concerned about. And I always looked at, okay, when again, are you paying for, like David Clarkson? Now he had injury situation, but you're paying for a marquee year. Jason Blake years ago, you're paying for a marquee year. You don't get that guy as a UFA giving you that kind of stuff in Toronto. So I think Ekblad. Well, I like what Brad Treliving's done with the D. I like the acquisitions. I mean, to me, I love Morgan Riley, but what's going on with Morgan Riley? Just all this, just he's your number one paid defenseman, and he has at other times shown it. Again, we need more consistency there. But I like the Ekblad. Who was the other one you mentioned? So you mentioned Ekblad, Marchand,
Bennett. Are you big into the Bennett conversation right now, Gordon?
So Bennett's going to get overpaid. Nothing wrong with that in some ways, but I think he's going to stay with Florida. I think, I'm not saying Matthew Knies could be Sam Bennett, but he seems to show a little bit of that. And you could get somebody, I believe, cheaper to do that kind of role. And again, like we go back to the sandpaper. Like that's what Brad Treliving talked about, having snot and sandpaper. And I go back to Zach Hyman and Nazem Kadri, just two excellent guys that have, one's hoisted the Stanley Cup, one might this year. He's in the final for the second time, even though he's been injured. So I just think those are kind of the next tier player. The society complains that they're squeezing out the middle class, but that's how the Leafs have operated. They squeezed out the middle class, like they basically,
True.
and so now with the cap going up, and if you have the Marner money available, and also, I mean, things like the Tanev contracts, so excellent contracts, like by giving him more term, he took less of a cap hit, and that is giving Treliving more flexibility, and that was an excellent pickup.
Mm-hmm. You talked about guys. It is so frustrating when the Leafs sign a guy who just came off a marquee year in some other market, and it would be pretty tough to expect them to do it again, let alone bring him into Toronto and expect him to be even better than that. A guy that's proven himself to a degree and knows what this market is like is John Tavares, another veteran type of guy who's going to take a haircut on his AAV. I know they're trying to change the DNA of this team, but do you think John Tavares is a guy who should be coming back? At what term and money do you think? And where does he slot in this lineup if he does actually come back?
Well, he had a really good season. And, the guy made the big move. Like, really, he's a vilified for life. Yeah, you ask what's Mitch Marner's going to come back as a Leaf. And here's a guy that was Mr. New York Islander, and he took himself being vilified to come home. So I believe they will should work something out. I was never big about him being the captain. And I think, I'm sure he can be part of a leadership group. I just think, because he's pretty serious meat and potatoes. I don't know if Austin's the right captain or not. I mean, they certainly they challenged him to be like Connor McDavid. Okay, Connor McDavid's wearing the C in Edmonton, and, we think that you can assume that kind of mantle. So, it said a lot team what John Tavares did. And then he goes out and has a hell of a season. So you're just talking earlier about the veteran type players. Now he's not 40 years old, but yeah, think about him for a number one overall pick who wasn't the great skater, because normally that's the number one thing that dominates. When he used to come here with the Islanders, I loved watching him do everything right, the greasy areas, all the things that he did right. And I enjoy watching him do that with the Leafs. And I want him to be back, and I believe he will be back.
Gordo, you were the youngest GM in NHL history. What's one lesson you learned that still applies to today's front offices?
Surround yourself with good people is number one. So don't surround yourself with yes men, and then ultimately, when I say go with your gut, make your own mistakes, okay, rather than listening or being coerced. So I'm saying one thing is you surround yourself with good people. Don't let them talk you into something as well. That kind of thing that you make the final decision. And there's no secret why. I mean, look at Jeff Jackson in Edmonton. Like, he's about as quality a guy as I got to know during my time with the Leafs. And look what Bill Zito's done in Florida. And that it's no mystery that the gold standard franchises, always have started really at the top. Now in Detroit, it's a bit more of a struggle right now because they've been one of the gold standards. But by and large, those would be the couple of things that still apply in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Gordy, if you were still the general manager, what would your number one priority be right now?
Oh, I'd be rich now, and I'd be retired. Right? That would be the thing. I think it's funny because I don't know if I would have used the term DNA, but I think it was a very apropos term from Brad Treliving, talking about a changing of the page and a turning of the page. So that would be to get, okay, let's get those guys you talked about with sandpaper and snot, and again, I keep going back to Hyman and Kadri. I mean, that ship has sailed there, but who are those kind of players out there? Like Florida, while the Leafs were, okay, going to pass Boston and Tampa Bay, which you can argue they've done on both counts, Florida was in the rearview mirror. Oh my goodness. They get Tkachuk. They get Sam Bennett. They get Sam Reinhart. They get Verhaeghe. They get Montour, and it goes on and on. Like all of a sudden they added all these guys, just like where everyone else was sitting. And so that's what happened. Toronto stood pat with a game plan, and Florida went and found those kinds of players. You don't do it overnight, but, bit by bit, they made those kind of moves.
I think it's a mentality too, and I honestly think that could be unlocked a bit now with the Shanahan era ending, taking nothing away from Brendan. I think it was just time to move on. You bring in Tree Living, year 2 of Craig Berube, and bringing in players that are more suitable to the style that Craig Berube plays. I think will be big, benefactors moving forward, I think, for this franchise. I wanted to leave you with this question. I always love asking former GMs and people around the league, what's a trade or signing from your GM days that nearly happened but didn't, or anything surrounding that era that almost happened, like so-and-so almost became a Leaf? You got any stories?
So I talked about it with Joe Sakic when he got inducted a couple of years ago. So I wasn't GM. Like I wasn't GM a long time. I know it seems like it because I talk about it incessantly. But anyway, I was there. I was there in the front office in one way or another for 14 years. And the draft, am I getting it right, 87, that we were picking 6th overall. And John Brophy was our coach. And he had way too much influence as a coach because the owner, Harold Ballard, liked him. So we are going to pick a defenseman, Luke Richardson, 6th overall. We feel, that's going to be the case if everything goes well in the first 5. And anyway, it did. So we've got Luke. And then I got to give Floyd Smith credit. He was our chief scout. So he makes a last minute kind of pitch that for Joe Sakic. And Joe, and all of a sudden the table's like kind of up in arms, like, holy crap, Joe, whatever. And anyway, John Brophy is going nuts because he doesn't like small centermen. It's you think about it, it's absurd a coach is even involved in who you're drafting, but he had the ear of the owner. So I always give Floyd Smith credit that he put it out there and sure enough, and Sakic wasn't even the first pick of the Quebec Nordiques. They took Brian Fogarty and they had a second pick in the first round. So I think he went about 16th or whatever it may be. And all these, I just always think about that, and anyway, c'est la vie. Probably I'm sure it worked out better for Joe Sakic in that regard, but that's what I remember.
I'm not going to sleep for the next 2 weeks after hearing Joe Sakic could have been a Toronto Maple Leaf. Gord, great story. I knew you'd bring the heat in that question. Appreciate your time. Always great talking Maple Leafs hockey with you. I still can't believe years later, removed from doing the job with you, we're still talking about the same shit, this damn core 4, Gordo.
Well, evidently not. We are, but evidently maybe not for the big term. But anyway, always enjoy your guys' show and appreciate being on.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.